Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this discussion on the case for land use and vehicle miles traveled strategies in creating connected communities. My name is Zaheen Hussein. I'm a research fellow with RMI. I'm also a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon University studying public policy and management, and have come from 8 years of experience in the sustainable community development world in the Pittsburgh region. I'm here with my colleague, Anna.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for this not being live. We're hoping that this is really just a prelude that gives us a chance to meet you all in the future and continue expanding on this topic. My name is Anna Zekulik. I'm a senior associate with RMI's urban transformation team, and my focus is on strategies for creating space to provide attainable housing in well-served urban environments and quantifying those benefits in terms of transportation emissions and equity outcomes, as well as climate resilience. So the focus of what we really want to express today is how in many US cities, baked within land use regulations is an inherent discouragement of livable densities. This takes the form of mandatory parking requirements, exclusive single detached zones, and besides those policy instruments, which are outright bans on multi-purpose mixed-use neighborhoods, baked within our zoning codes are also a variety of market instruments that make it very costly to provide new housing in neighborhoods that are already well serviced. And that is both felt on the developer side as well as consumers looking to rent and own in neighborhoods served by good schools, access to well-paying jobs, as well as mass transit to move about those neighborhoods. So I'd like to share with you some land use analysis that we are producing for a number of US cities. The focus of these graphs, of these maps will be San Diego. We are hoping to expand this to Pittsburgh before we meet you all again in the future. But I do believe the context has or resonates a lot with what Pittsburgh feels as well. So the blue area here is the permeable pavement dedicated to commercial and residential properties in San Diego right before World War II. And here we see the not invention of suburbs, but the real expansion of it post-World War II. Getting to a more recent history in the yellow, orange here, very recent history. And finally, what we see today, which is a lot of development happening in the wildfire urban interface. So the reason developers are producing new housing in these greenfield environments is because there is a bit of demand, but it's much more because it's where development can happen. Number of instruments are preventing developers from providing new housing in well-serviced neighborhoods like San Diego's downtown core, which is where the vast majority of jobs are. And this is translating to serious lack of urban resilience.
This pattern of suburban development also holds true for the Pittsburgh region. Now, of course, unlike California, our region is not faced with the impacts of wildfires. So what does this dynamic look like in Pittsburgh? With the development patterns of the past 70 years, as we've built further out into the suburban and exurban areas, the removal of permeable surfaces have created greater stormwater management challenges for downstream communities in the urban core. In addition to creating flooding and landslide problems, developers will continue to see increases in development costs within the urban core unless climate adaptive measures see greater investment. Additionally, as folks have to come in from suburban areas driving more and more, we see increases in vehicle miles traveled, which also contributes to increases in carbon footprints. Additionally, there are inherent inefficiencies in energy uses in communities that are built less densely than urban areas.
So even looking past just the transportation-related emissions of our car-dependent land use, or car-dependent zoning codes, there are a number of indirect emissions as well. It's very expensive for municipalities to provide services to homes that have distance between them. They're dedicating a lot of space to roads and other impermeable pavements. And there's a huge embodied carbon cost to this new construction happening outside downtown cores. On the other side of this is what developers feel, which is that US cities have made it very hard to build in neighborhoods that are desirable and already well serviced by transit, good schools, green space, other essential services. Apologies for Pittsburgh not being part of this permitting analysis just yet, but we are intending to keep producing some Pittsburgh-focused data ahead of our following presentation, future presentation. So what I'm sharing here comes from UC Berkeley and is going to be something that RMI expands on in 2022, which is really quantifying the decarbonization, putting a GHG amount to urban infill and vehicle miles traveled reduction strategies. That's policies that are incentivizing active and mass transit to hit home for policymakers that this is, if not the single biggest tool in your toolbox to decarbonize your urban environment, one of the top three. Again, this is looking at San Diego. Apologies, we're going to expand this for Pittsburgh in the future. But what we want to hit home here is that these are policies 100% in cities' control. They can be making space for infill, transit-oriented development and other housing in well-serviced neighborhoods as a climate lever. Getting this just to, again, hitting home a bit, but looking at it a bit more beyond just decarbonization. Creating space for housing in well-serviced communities, especially where they already have high income, only creates more attainable housing for lower and moderate income households. It takes a big chunk of air pollution and other negative side effects of vehicle associated emissions out of the environment, and it allows us space to continue and expand on our urban biodiversity. The social aspect is also really clear and arguably what's been able to help cities like Portland and Minneapolis take the first steps to comprehensive upzoning and of a bigger scale. Creating space for people to age in place, for diverse families, for single individuals, by creating, and apologize, we don't go into it too much, but missing middle housing, topographies that do not vastly change the urban form, can be 4 to 6 unit properties on what was formerly thought of as single, formerly regulated as single attached housing nodes, can do a lot to get development happening for both decreasing the cost of providing affordable housing, subsidized housing, as well as market rate.
Now, developers and policymakers face barriers that inhibit land use and transportation reforms that build towards more dense, equitable, and climate-forward solutions. This includes political barriers, standard market practice or business as usual barriers, consumer and stakeholder resistance like NIMBYism, as well as prevailing equity barriers. In legacy cities like Pittsburgh, aging infrastructure presents a cost barrier to many forms of development. A couple of things we've heard additionally over and over again are that developers are willing to build as densely as policy allows. However, when it comes to policymaking, there tends to be a big gap in communication between developers and policymakers. Additionally, in the matter of the city's convoluted planning process, one developer we spoke to shared their internal map of the approval process for development in the city. While larger developers have the resources to navigate this process, developers as well as elected officials have indicated that the process presents a massive equity barrier for smaller and upstart development firms who are trying to get a footing in the market. Many of these firms just don't have the time or capacity to be able to effectively work their way through this web without expending disproportionate amounts of resources. So what are strategies that cities, communities, and developers can co-develop? Right-sized upzoning, policies to support infill and redevelopment, as well as equitable transit-oriented development are where we see the greatest potential.
So we'd like to leave you with a few examples of where developers are, once they've been enabled to create mixed-use, multi-purpose developments, are really leading in innovation. So in the upper right-hand corner, cul-de-sac Tempe is a completely car-free district about to come online in early 2022, already close to 100% occupancy as soon as it does open, that has just really been able to create space for biodiversity, for active transportation modes, for urban forms that create shading that further incentivizes active transportation, because the developer is not forced to reserve space for single occupancy vehicles, meaning roadways, as well as in parking. It has brought costs significantly down, especially for the studio and single bedroom units in the properties, and has been paired with some pretty advanced mobility partnerships. All residents will have free mass transit access, as well as significant access to new mobility modes such as e-scooters, bike shares, electric vehicle car sharing. And the fact that it is near 100% occupancy before it's even open really speaks to the desire for people to live in these kind of communities. Car-free districts, net zero districts are in huge demand due to the quality of life that they provide, and because they're able to offer these amenities at a lower cost, because high emitting pieces like cars are taken out of the equation. So yes, this in conclusion was kind of just a primer of some research that RMI's urban transformation, carbon-free mobility, and wider RMI is leading on. We really hope to tailor it to what we know is a very diverse audience on the other side of this recording, developers, engineers, all Pittsburgh based. And we will do so when we get the opportunity to speak to you again in the spring. Yeah, just thank you guys so much. See you soon.